Why do they lie? Why do the communists lie with such ease? They do. They lie about everything. If you've watched any minute of the DNC this year, you saw just lie after lie after lie after lie. They're going to secure the border. They love the military. They love law enforcement. We're going to fund the police. Just gigantic lies. Well, it's important to understand why they can justify that, because we all have a conscience. Doesn't matter what your morality happens to be, what your religious beliefs happen to be. Everyone has a conscience, right? You do, I do, everyone does. How do you justify the things you did that day as you lay your head down on a pillow at night? If you're a communist, if you're Kamala Harris, if you're the Democrats themselves, how do you justify lying about every single thing you want to do? Well, you believe in something higher to justify the lie. It serves your revolution. It serves your religion, and therefore it gives your conscience the justification it needs to lie about everything at all times. And I'm here to tell you, if these people get elected and if they're able to implement their economic agenda, there is more pain and suffering coming for this country than you can possibly imagine. Set aside the speeches, set aside the lies. Let's just listen for a minute about Dome's policies and the things she actually wants to do.
It has to be about a goal of saying everybody should end up in the same place. And since we didn't start in the same place, some folks might need more. Equitable distribution. Giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place. So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests often everybody should get the same thing. Well, that often assumes everybody started out in the same place, as opposed to equity, which is everyone should end up in the same place. And if you then understand not everybody started out in the same place, you understand some people need more. So we all end up in the same place, right? We are proud of the fact that equity is one of our guiding principles. Proud of the fact that we understand equality is important, but not everybody starts out on the same base.
That's communism. That's what it is. She loves that concept, talks about it all the time. Equity is communism. And of course, she's trying to do the best she can to massage that, kind of tweak the language a little bit. But what's she saying? She's saying not only should the government control things, the government should discriminate. You've had privileges. You've been given things that this Democrat constituent or this Democrat constituent, they didn't start out the same place you did. So when the government steals large quantities of your money and hands it to people who hate your guts and happen to vote for Dome, well, don't you believe in equity? Equity is communism. Equity is communism. It is a communist concept from Karl Marx all the way to today. That's what equity is. Don't ever let these people convince you that they're moderate, that they're just kind of a little on the left, that they're even anything close to an acceptable option. 4 years of Dome walls will be like a nuclear bomb dropped on the United States of America. And the American people had better wake up to that fact. That's my concern. I'm not necessarily worried about you. I'm worried about your normie friends, your liberal Aunt Peggy. I'm worried about the people who believe the lies or try to make excuses to go vote for them. I had this conversation the other day. I was with a group of dudes. It was all Republicans. There was one Democrat there. I didn't bring him, but there was one Democrat there. And that conversation I had with him, I can't get it out of my head. He said something. Of course, he had to bring it up. We weren't even talking politics. You see what Trump said? And I said, yeah, I saw what Trump said. What was wrong with it? He, of course, had no specifics. So he's crazy. That guy's crazy. That's all he kept saying. I was trying to stay calm. I said, okay, what was crazy? Which part? The guy's just a nut. Can't believe anyone's going to vote for that. And so I said, okay, so you're going to vote for Kamala Harris? Well, yeah. You know she came out for price controls, right? That's what I told the guy. So you know she came out for price controls, right? Well, why is that bad? And I explained to him very calmly that will result in businesses going under, probably empty shelves, starvation. It's communism that's been horrific every time it's been tried. I just laid it all out for him as logically as I possibly could. And you know what he said back to me? Kid you not. Well, she's not going to be able to actually implement that. He's going to go vote for the communists. And his justification is she won't be able to implement any of the horrors she has planned. Jeez. And that's why Governor Ratchet, Gretchen Whitmer, that's why Democrats, that's why they go on TV and they try to act like, wow, this stuff's no big deal.
Well, I think people are reading too much into what has been put out there.
Reading too much into it, huh? We're reading too much into all these communist schemes, of course. What are you doing? Joining me now, the author of many books. You really probably should pick up You Will Own Nothing, because it looks like that's where we're headed, my friend Carol Roth. Carol, are you reading too much into these whole price control things? What's wrong with price controls after all, Carol? The prices are too high. Government should just tell them, don't raise prices. In fact, lower prices. This sounds wonderful. What's wrong with it?
Yeah, I love the fact that the only sort of proponents of these policies that Comrade Kamala is putting out are the people who say, oh, they'll never get enacted. So basically, you're saying that she has no plan and we should just be voting on vibes and joy because, joy pays for your food and it pays for your rent and it puts gas in your car and all of that kind of stuff. The price controls thing is one of many of the most frightening things I've ever heard. And they keep coming out of the Kamala Harris campaign. Kamala Harris has been very responsible for the economic pain that Americans are feeling. She had the deciding vote on everything from the American Rescue Plan, which stoked historic inflation, to the Inflation Reduction Act, which has kept our deficits at near $2 trillion a year. So the fact that people are feeling economic pain, and that is the number one issue, she needs a villain. She can't just accept that, that's her responsibility. So now it's these greedy corporations who apparently just woke up and decided to be greedy over the last 3.5 years. Now, we know this is just not the case. If you look at the PPI versus the CPI, the PPI is a wholesale measure of inflation. It's the inputs into goods and services versus the CPI, which is what consumers are actually paying. If there was gouging going on either at the wholesale level or the retail level, we would expect to see a massive divergence between the inflation and those two indicators, and they have tracked each other very closely. So we know that that's obviously not the case. But the idea, Jesse, of price gouging and price controls, this is just absolutely, like, if you bought into the corporate greed and the fact that, grocery stores have 1.6% net profit margins last year, her fix to that is something that is going to cause rationing and shortages. Every person knows this. She's getting panned across the aisle, except for these, good little communists like Whitmer who are saying, no, just don't pay attention to it. That's the best thing they can say about it.
Carol, can you take me to Econ 101 class, because there's a bunch of people watching right now who want to be able to explain this to their liberal Aunt Peggies. Why don't price controls work? Why doesn't it work? Eggs are too expensive. Why can't government just say you're not allowed to charge that much for eggs? Why doesn't it work?
Because if companies don't have the ability to charge their own costs of goods and services, and you have to remember that companies not only have their inputs gone up, but their labor has gone up, their overhead has gone up, their energy has gone up, so their own cost of doing business is higher. Then you have businesses that it's either not worth it for them to be able to produce, or they go out of business entirely. And you have fewer goods and services available. So in the case of food, you would have less food available. And that means that you would either have rationing, which is some other way other than price of dividing up those scarce resources, or in the worst case scenario, you would just have shortages and social unrest and all the things that go along with it. So it's one of those things that sounds great in theory, but the outcome, and this is like you said, in every Econ 101 book, everybody knows this, is that if you put in a price control, you're going to get less of those goods and services.
Mm-hmm. Do you think these ideas come from her? I mean, there's not much that comes from her. This is very clearly not somebody who does a lot of reading or thinking. This really is just the communist machine that's around her now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've contended for a long time that Joe Biden hasn't been running the country for the last 3.5 years. There's some sort of regime, and it's the same regime that said, sorry, Joe, you're no longer going to be in, and tap Kamala in. Obviously, part of that plan is, okay, you have to go along with whatever it is that we say. And we're seeing the advisors that she's bringing in, people like Brian Deese, who was a Biden economic advisor, who was an Obama economic advisor, who advised Hillary Clinton in that interim period when she ran for president. And oh, by the way, who's somebody with like a political science and law degree and doesn't actually come from the private sector, except for a short stint as BlackRock and as head of sustainable investing. But these are not people behind her who are small business owners, who have been in the private sector, who know how things work. And I mean, you've listened to her talk about things like how much she loves buses and the cloud, which she thinks happens to be an actual cloud above your head where you put things. So the idea that she has a lot of economic prowess, I think, is pretty clear that that's not happening. She's just taking whatever the talking points are and spewing them out. And the talking points, ladies and gentlemen, are completely frightening. Like if you thought the last 3.5 years that her and Biden were responsible for were bad, everything that's coming out, basically food shortages, worsening the housing crisis, and crashing the stock market and the economy. If that sounds joyful to you, well, then vote for Kamala Harris.
So, Carol, how could so many people vote for Kamala Harris? We all know, Lord willing, it's less than 50%, but we all know roughly half the country's going to go punch that button for Dome this November. How could that be? Are we this dumb now?
Yes, we are this dumb as a country. We have a economically and financially illiterate electorate, and people who aren't in the flow of information or who listen to the corporate press don't even know what's going on, nor could they process it if they did know what's going on. The fact that we're at crisis levels of debt to GDP 120%, this would be a bad outcome in any point in time, but we are at this very scary situation. People have forgotten that the U.S. debt has been downgraded multiple times under the Biden-Harris regime. So this is a very scary time. And instead of being serious and saying this is the most important issue, so I'm going to vote for the most important issue, they want to be a part of history. They want to be part of the vibes. They want to be part of the cool kids campaign and align with their favorite Hollywood celebrity instead of getting realistic and understanding that the American way of life is under threat. And if they vote for vibes, they're going to have some really bad vibes coming down the line.
Yeah, Great Depression, food shortages, things like that always come with some really icky vibes, don't they?
Yeah.
Carol,
yeah.
Thank you. You are the best. I appreciate it. All right. Tiana Lowe-Desher joins us in a moment. Break down some more of these economic policies they're proposing. Look, it's all that may have made you uncomfortable, but I'm right, and so is she. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.